Join Corey Cove tonight at Chatters in Monticello for the return of Coors Light Hockey Night. Watch the Minnesota Wild play Pittsburgh and play trivia for your chance to win a pair of sweet tickets to the game on January 19th. Find all of the event info at KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
Courtesy of Standard Heating and Air and standardheating.com. Here comes the scribe, Ben Goessling, at Ben Goessling via the tweet machine. Covers the Minnesota Vikings for the Star Tribune. Don't forget about the newsletter and or the podcast at Ben Goessling via Twitter. Holy cow, I've forgotten the man's name. I met your publisher at the airport.
Steve Grove?
Steve. Yeah, right. And like, when he introduced himself to me, last Friday, flying to Colorado this weekend. It's Steve Grove.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I thought he said Grow. So I thought he was like related to Doug Groh.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I started going on that road, and he's like, Grove. I'm like, okay, well, nice to meet you. That's the publisher, man.
Yes.
I said good things about Jim Suham, Lavelli Neal III, and Mark Craig.
Yeah. You mentioned anybody else in there?
Yep.
Andrew Kramer?
Yep. Yeah, Andrew Kramer.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
Good. I just wanted to make sure he got them all.
Now, we dressed you up. I think I made you sound like a cross between Jim Murray, Scott Ostler, Mike Lupica, and Michael Russo.
That's
not bad.
We'll take it. That's a good
nice man.
That's a good cross section.
Nice man. What goes into being the publisher, by the way? That's a lofty title.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that goes into that job that's over my head, but I mean, he's working on everything from, we've done this big expansion across Minnesota now, expanding preps coverage, expanding news coverage of all these different cities. So it's some of those things. It's talking with people about events we're going to be doing. I think the future of what news looks like in this state. There's a lot on his plate. I mean, it's not day-to-day news stuff per se, but it's a lot of ambitions the paper has and ways to support kind of what we're doing going forward. So it's a lot of, more C-suite type stuff, I suppose.
Yep. Steve, my new buddy, you and your beautiful family. God bless you guys, and great meeting you. And I did represent you.
Yeah.
And you've always wanted to write an op-ed on the person for whom you're voting to become the next president.
Oh, of course.
Well, I put that in front of him.
Okay.
He says that Ben text me.
Yeah, that's great. I'll get that done
next Monday before the Tuesday.
Got to get the newsletter done, but we'll find some time for that in there as well.
Put it in the newsletter. That's cool.
Other large papers have had some good experiences recently with those sorts of things and endorsements and such.
Yeah, that's I stay in my lane. My lane is
understood,
covering news about the Vikings.
Sports.
Yep. No Blake Cashman to start practice yesterday. I noticed via Andrew Kramer. I think you liked it or retweeted it.
Yep.
Oh, no Blake Cashman to begin the Monday. What do you think about Blake Cashman for the Sunday night?
Well, the Monday practice, it's kind of an extra day after the mini bye, so I would have expected that they weren't going to do much with him yesterday anyway. I would think that they will probably do a little more with him later in the week. O'Connell seemed optimistic that they have a chance to get him,
right?
Yep. Yeah, they have a chance to get him for this game against the Colts. So I would think we'd maybe see him later in the week. I wouldn't worry a whole lot yet about him not being out there for a Monday, kind of an extra day. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, obviously, is when we'll get the injury reports. So we'll have a better sense of it from there. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they give it a little further into the week before they put him out there.
Not having Cashy clearly has played into facets of the last two losses, but also the level of stock against whom you're playing, against whom you're racing. I mean, the Ben Johnson bit A, and then 1A, Stafford with Kupp, Nakua, and Kyron Williams with all those touchdowns. Those are some high-end operations up here.
It is, and I think it is. I asked O'Connell that at the end of his press conference. How much do you kind of say, hey, we've got problems here and we've lost two in a row, versus these are two pretty good offenses with a lot of equity, a lot of experience at quarterback, a lot of talent around those particular quarterbacks. How much do you kind of balance one versus the other? And he said, it is kind of that line of trying to figure out what happened. And he said kind of on a play-to-play detail, it's more that in the sense of what went wrong, what could have happened from a coaching technique standpoint, rather than this kind of, oh my gosh, the world is falling, or hey, it's fine. It's more like on a granular level for him. But yes, I think you did see two teams and two operations that had a lot of the pieces you need to make things happen against this defense. And the fact that they were within 4 days of each other does make a difference in the optics of the whole thing. But I do think that particular draw, I mean, that always looked like a tough stretch anyway, that Lions game. And then you go out on Thursday night on the West Coast. They haven't won a West Coast night game since like 1996. So that's never been a good draw.
Well, they haven't won a Thursday night game since 78.
Yeah. It's not been one that has been very kind to them. And I don't think that means, hey, everything's fine, don't worry about any of it. But that particular draw did put them vulnerable, especially missing a guy like Cashman. I do think some of that goes into it.
Yeah. You know, into that game on Thursday, Cooper Kupp had always felt like he was definitely going to be back.
Yeah.
And on our side of things, we're thinking about TJ at the time. And I'm just, he needs to be out there Sunday night with the Colts. I need to see TJ Hawkinson. But this Puka thing,
caught me by surprise a little bit.
Do you think maybe it caught O'Connell and caught Flores and caught this team by surprise? Because I couldn't have imagined, and you see it so often, these guys, the practice window opens up and all of that. Was practice, did it open up like 90 minutes before the game, it felt like?
Yeah.
And suddenly he's out there for 7 and 110 or something like that?
Yeah, I don't think he had been through a full practice. So if he was going to play, this question of how much, I think was a little bit of a thought process of what is he actually going to be able to go out there and do. But obviously they felt good enough about it to put him out there. And then when you do have him back, they got him involved right away. I think the first couple series, they throw to him, 2-3 times per series. So
I just think we got McVade a little bit there.
Yeah.
I think it was brilliant.
Yeah, there are a few more weapons there. And yes, the fact that nobody thought he was going to be out there that much, maybe you don't prepare for him quite the same way, but that offense does change a lot when they have both of those guys.
So when you go from those two offenses and now looking ahead to the Colts, obviously as much as you report on it, we'll get to hear from the coaches today and those things as we go forward. Looking forward to having KO in here at 11. It feels like from the firepower aspect that PA mentioned with the last two games, that if you needed a get-right moment, the opportunity for Flores to spend this full week, plus maybe the mini-bye as well, truly scheming against Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, that this is kind of we all need a deep breath over a bad 5-day stretch, right?
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think it is going to look different against a guy like Richardson, if in fact it is Richardson. I think
there's some Flacco things.
Yeah, Shane Steichen said yesterday we're looking at everything or evaluating everything when Richardson tapped out of the game for a couple plays on Sunday, which you do not see happen with a quarterback very often. And I don't think that's something that, people say, oh, it's only a couple plays. Like, yeah, it's the quarterback. Everything means a little more when that comes from the quarterback. So we'll see how that goes this week. But yeah, it does seem like an opportunity. Young quarterbacks have not fared well against this defense. It seems like an opportunity for them to get right a little bit. But at the same time, and O'Connell has said this, particularly after the Lions game, the Lions and teams of that ilk are going to be the ones that they have to beat if they want to go anywhere. So they have a stretch here, I think, where you can stack up some wins. I think these next few games are a lot more inviting than the last couple have been. But part of the reason everybody was talking about this team earlier in the year, it's not just the wins, it's who they beat. It's the 49ers, it's the Texans, it's the Packers, it's some teams with some equity. And now you lose to a team like the Lions that's been there, and the Rams have been a playoff team and obviously a Super Bowl team a couple of years ago. So I do think that piece of it is in their thinking a little bit of, these are teams we're going to see again. How are we faring in these games? That matters as much as you have to stack the wins to get in, but then you have to be able to beat teams like the ones they just lost to go anywhere once you do get in.
If the Minnesota Vikings want Sunday to be a get-well Sunday night, should they want Anthony Richardson to play?
I kind of think so.
Because like 2 years ago, it's 33-zip. One of the underrated facets of that game, as I'll bring up with O'Connell, hopefully it works, is into the second half, they went 3 and out.
Yeah.
No, they went 3 and out, start second half.
Yep.
They can't win. It's unbelievable. Then they come back and win. But Matt Ryan at that stage of his life and his career, Matt Ryan, Joe Flacco, Matt Ryan. It's kind of the same. Their offensive line kind of the same.
Yeah.
And with Downs, with Pittman Jr. and stuff. I mean, I can argue they're better with Flacco than they were a couple of years ago when they jumped us 33-0.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, Flacco, you just kind of, you're going to get somebody that's seen a lot and will run the offense efficiently and can kind of be trusted to keep things under control, especially in that environment. I think Anthony Richardson, as talented as he is, and, he caught a lot of people's eyes, the Vikings' eyes included, before that draft 2 years ago, but he still looks like he's trying to figure a lot of this out and, missed a lot of last year because of injuries, so still is very, very raw in the progression. And a lot of the thing with him is you knew he was a project. Anybody that was talking about taking him knew he was a project that was going to take a little bit of time to develop. So you get some of that inexperience with him that you don't have with Flacco. Yeah, I do kind of think as talented as he is and some of the wow plays that you see, that throw he made, I think it was week 1, that, 65 yards in the air kind of stuff.
Oh, to Alec Pierce?
Yeah, it's some of that stuff is impressive, but I think on a play-to-play basis, Flacco probably is going to give them a little more than Richardson might at this point.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking because the last 2 games, now that we're talking about that, it is kind of this interesting boomer bust dynamic that the Colts offense has sometimes where, they'll get you 4.5, 5, 6 yards a clip with Taylor.
Right.
But then there's really not a lot of in between that and then taking Josh Downs or Alec Pierce and running 9 routes and trying to dagger you for 70 yards. But that's something until the last 2 games, I would say the Vikings were so good at taking that away.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of the frustrating conversation about these last 2 losses. So I personally, again, looking forward to seeing Anthony Richardson, looking forward to beating Anthony Richardson, looking forward to seeing our defense not let Alec Pierce get behind us.
Yeah. I mean, and that has been the thing, the first few games of the season, a lot of the coverage they want to play, it's we don't need to worry as much about things coming downfield because we get pressure and the ball's going to come out and you rally to the ball and that works. But you have seen teams be able to take a few more shots downfield lately, and that's certainly been part of what the Colts want to do, and Richardson maybe buys them a little time to do that. But you can't live that way every play against this team, I don't think. So you are going to have to find ways to hit on things, because the other thing that Goff and Stafford have done really well is hit things over the middle. And that I do think is where Cashman missing.
We need Blake.
It affects things quite a bit. So, they have been able to sustain drives that way rather than just taking shots. But yes, I think if they are able to get Cashman back and it is Richardson, the plays that you need to sustain drives beyond just the big ones and beyond Jonathan Taylor, when you do need 3rd and 8, a conversion of 12 yards in the second layer of a defense, I think Flacco's probably a little better set up to get those, and the Vikings are better set up to deny those, especially if Cashman is back.
The splendid scribe, Ben Goessling, at Ben Goessling, covers the Vikes for the Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. And under the assumption the Minnesota Vikings do not sign TJ Clemmings to the active roster, are we to believe the offensive line into the Colts game is either going to be left tackle Brandel, left guard Dalton Reisner, Bradbury, Ingram, O'Neal, or Quessenberry, Brandel, Bradbury, Reisner, or Ingram, O'Neal? It's one of those 2 iterations, correct?
I think so, yes.
Which one do you think's coming?
Well, I think they are. Brandel talked yesterday about I'll do whatever the team needs me to do, and it's been a minute since I played tackle, but he didn't seem like he was shying away from that, which makes me wonder if that is going to be the way that they go. Put him at tackle, put Reisner at guard, and then keep Ingram on the right side.
So I'm kind of glad you mentioned it that way, because it kind of felt like he was alluding like this has been part of the conversation.
Yeah.
This isn't us just playing big guy here and now we can just stack him out and we're just being rubes about it.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like that's a legitimate conversation taking place.
Yeah, I think it is. And Brandel is a guy that they've liked in a lot of spots. They made him the left guard this year, but they've worked him out in a lot of different spots in the past, and he's played different spots in the past. So, and in fact, I think when O'Neal went down a couple of years ago, he was the guy that stepped in there at right tackle, I think, at the end of that season. No, actually, that was Oli Udoh, I think, at that point. But
Oli Udoh.
in the right tackle spot in the playoffs. But Brandel has worked in a lot of those different spots, and the versatility is part of what he brings. I think having him in one spot, certainly that's what you want to be able to do, but do you feel good about David Quessenberry over the long haul at left tackle? I think it's the other question. Because whatever they do, I'm sure they want to get into a situation where we can roll with these 5, and this is what we can kind of hang our hat on for more than just this week, rather than having to switch this up every week. So whatever they think is going to work long term, I think is may win out in the end here.
The thing that I'm interested to find out, and they've had a couple of days to work on this, and maybe they'll go and sign somebody too. Probably they're not finding, I don't think, a starter off the street.
Probably not.
But they'll find a depth piece, I'm sure. Regardless of all of that, I'm curious how this offense functionally changes. Like, are we talking about potentially handcuffing a tight end to that side? Yeah. Does that impact the reps that you're putting on an Aaron Jones if you believe that he's better in pass protection than Ty Chandler? You know, there are some things, and again, they've had time to think about this a little bit, but in the same sense, this has a chance to, I don't know how drastically, maybe that's hyperbole to say that, but, you know, how this thing looks as soon as Sunday night and how they navigate that moving forward, regardless of who's at left tackle.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And the other one I wonder about with that, to kind of build that out a little bit, is what does that mean for TJ Hawkinson? Because you've had situations in the past, I think, where they've liked Johnny Munt in pass protection. He kind of stays in some of those in those settings. Obviously, if it's a passing situation, you want Hawkinson on the field because he's a great receiving threat. But when he's coming back from an ACL, how do you manipulate your use of him with the possible need to have a tight end in there chipping a little bit more? I'm curious to see how all of that goes, because you're right. They may need to have more tight end chipping, or running back stays in pass protection, or, you know, some combination of those things, you know, whatever it would look like. Maybe even a wide receiver here and there, like we've seen teams do to them.
Yeah.
There are a lot of ways to address it, but all of them come with some dip into the bucket from something else in the offense that they're going to have to figure out. So I think there's a lot of those questions that are going to be interesting to watch.
Do we happen to have any Latu steam at this stage of the equation? 15th overall pick in the draft by the Indianapolis Colts. He plays on the same side as Kwity Paye, though. And Latu averages 1 solo tackle a game, averages about 38 and a half plays a game on defense, pass rusher, and he has a couple of sacks. So Wes Phillips speaks today, right?
Yep. So in about an hour.
Yeah, but be curious to see if he says anything about old Latu.
Yeah, I think obviously a guy that I think he ended up being the guy that ended that run of all of the offensive players in the draft. It ended up being the first defensive player taken, and certainly a guy that a lot of people liked as a disruptive force that can get in the backfield. And they've done a nice job of accumulating a few of those guys over the last few years in Indy. I mean, that was a need. I mean, when they take Kwity Paye, a guy the Vikings liked in that draft as well. They've done a nice job of getting some pieces up front. So you do have to think about some of those things. But yes, Latu, Paye, both guys that I think are going to be a factor. Paye moves around. You know, they are going to have to figure out some ways to counter that, especially when they're kind of going through this transition on the offensive line.
Right. Do you play any games in terms of just kind of analyzing Dallas Turner in terms of the first round selection for the Minnesota Vikings? He's played a total of 7 snaps the last 2 games. And then also, because you got to look at it situationally as well, right? Like how the Colts might rely on a Latu more than the Vikings. Well, clearly they do.
Yeah.
More so than what they've gotten out of Turner thus far. You play any games with that mentally in terms of, you know, what his trajectory has been through 8 games here with us, Dallas Turner, versus you're seeing other guys and Latu being one of them. He's only got 2 sacks this year, but he's second or third on the team in QB hits. Like he's been a productive part of that defense.
Yeah. It has been noticeable, and I'm starting to get a lot more people that write in with questions about that for the newsletter. We do a mailbag section every week, and I'm starting to get a lot more of the Dallas Turner questions of, hey, what does this mean for him long term? I think the fact that they've gotten as much as they have out of Grenard Van Ginkel has
Jones.
Jones, especially in that early stretch, has made that
quiet
so
recently,
that
though, right?
Yeah, he's been quiet. And that's kind of where I wonder about it a little bit, is when Jones is not producing the way he was early. And sacks kind of come in waves. Obviously, we probably shouldn't put that much stock into just sacks, but I don't think the pressure numbers have been as great for him lately either. So when you want that third rusher, does Turner become a little more of a factor? They've tried the off-ball linebacker thing with him that I don't think has yielded any great gains so far. And then we've seen some moments on special teams where just kind of situational awareness, I think, has been a little bit of a question with him. So I do wonder how it's going to go here over the next few games, because I think certainly they could use him use a little bit more pass rush when you are in those obvious passing downs and you want another pass rusher. It seems like, do you just put him on the edge and say, go after the quarterback? I think there are ways to simplify things for him if that's part of it as a rookie. But yeah, I don't think he's, that a few games here is any indication of bust. I mean, that's the kind of questions I end up getting a lot. But
well, of course, because of Lewis Cine, and I don't think it's Turner's fault, but there is that vibe where, okay, first round pick, it doesn't work out, he moves on.
Yep.
Well, now we go back to the first round defender again. First time in a long time, by the way, the Vikings have drafted a defensive end first round in the draft, and then you see 7 snaps the last 2 games. I got it during fan line, during the feast, the text line now. What the heck's up with Dallas Turner? Is this another bust? Kwesi made a massive mistake, and it's like, it's only 8 games.
Yeah.
But people want to see the kid out there.
Well, yes, and you do see a lot of times where edge rushers come in and make an impact right away in the NFL. I mean, we've seen that happen, whether it's Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett over the years. It is one of those positions that you can come in and contribute pretty quickly, and I think that's maybe a little bit of it too. Is this guy going to do that? And if so, why not? I think the thing that makes it different than Cine is it's fairly reasonable to assume that any decision they make about a defensive player at this point is coming with a lot of input from Brian Flores. Yeah. So if they are trading up to get Dallas Turner, and we all saw the Kevin O'Connell, the meme face that came out of that pick, they were very excited about him. So it's not the thing anymore of he was drafted to play in a different scheme for a different coordinator, and then Flores comes in and he's being asked to do different things and he doesn't fit as well. He was drafted to be part of this team and this scheme, which I think means that they still feel pretty strongly about his potential. It does also mean that there's not a change probably coming, at least schematically. I think if Flores were to get a head coaching job somewhere, I think they try to keep a lot of the tenets of what they've done over the last couple of years, which means you are going to have to play
That's a good point.
in this world, I would expect. So if he's not getting it, it's not like you're going to expect some third, exit door number 3 here to come out and do something else. So he does have some development, I think, yet, but it's certainly one of those things to keep watching. I don't think it's anywhere near bust. I don't think it's anywhere near, cut the cord on any of this stuff. I understand the scene comparisons, but I think if he makes some developments here, there's still, we've seen it. The athleticism is certainly there. He's just got to put it together.
The voice of the scribe, Ben Goessling. He's our sacred scribe, courtesy of Standard Heating and Air. StandardHeating.com for more information. Another segment with Ben around the corner, then Unused Du Nord, then Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, joins us here at the TCO radio studio at 11 a.m. And we are in search of a talkback to play for the head coach. Talkback Tuesday, though. Go to the free iHeartRadio app, find the microphone. You have up to 30 seconds to ask Kevin O'Connell a question or offer up a statement, and we will drop it in for you about 35 minutes from now. More with the scribe coming up shortly, but first.
The Fan and 2 men and a junk truck want to give you a shot to put $1,000 in your hand with our national cash contest. Enter the keyword WIN. That's WIN at KFAN.com now for your shot at winning. That's keyword WIN. Enter it now at KFAN.com. Stick around following every noon Vikings game this season for Vikings Overtime, hosted by Paul Meat Sauce Lambert, presented by Park Chrysler Jeep in Burnsville. Catch them all right here on KFAN and on the free iHeartRadio app.
This is your more bounce to the ounce leader, the Fan and KFAN.com, courtesy of Sukup and Sukup Manufacturing. It's a Tuesday at the Minnesota Vikings facility, which means into the second half of the radio show. Here's Ben Goessling, the scribe, covers the Vikings for the Star Tribune, with a comprehensive trade deadline piece. You can read at StarTribune.com or learn more about it via Ben's Twitter, at Ben Goessling. With mucho cap space and limited draft capital, what was the gist of the bit?
The gist of it is this is a team that is in a kind of a similar situation to 2022 in the sense that it is in contention for a playoff spot, but this may not be the year that you need to push all of the chips in. So what's the solution to that? I think it could look something like 22. If they make a move for a big-time player, and this is kind of what people ask about, I mean, that probably has to involve the first-round pick. Mm-hmm. I get that. If they were to do something like that, I would expect that it's for someone that is not unlike the situation TJ Hawkinson was in 2 years ago, where it's still on a rookie contract. This is somebody they think could be in their long-term picture. Those guys are hard to find. But if it's somebody like a J.C. Horn from Carolina, that name comes up a lot as a corner. And this is more from fans, not any internal steam that I have on that front. But it would, at the same time, I think make some sense. If you're going to do something like that, if you're going to make a move, you're making it for somebody that I think is going to be in the long-term picture, because this window that they have probably opens up a little more once McCarthy is kind of fully developed and Turner is a bigger piece of the pass rush. I think all of those things probably take a year yet to get to that point, and then obviously they have all this cap space that they're going to be able to continue to add. So I think going all in for this year probably isn't necessarily the move. You do some things that can help you out, but also have an eye towards the future, I think that's kind of where I went in the piece, is saying this may be a way to kind of balance the fact that they are in the mix in the NFC this year with the window per se is still probably fully formed in a couple of years.
It could be argued Sam Laporta is a better overall tight end than TJ Hawkinson.
Sure.
It can be argued.
Yep.
How fast were the Lions playing in that deal? I mean, well, seriously, they knew the next draft is probably the deepest tight end draft in the history of the NFL. I mean, Green Bay got Musgrave. That was their first tight end pick. Tucker Kraft's better than him.
Yeah.
And they got Ben Sims.
Yeah.
Undrafted tight end from Baylor was here.
Yep.
And they liked what they saw. So they're three deep with tight ends from that thick tight end draft.
Yeah.
Dalton Kincaid and so on.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Right. So, I mean, when they made that move, and TJ can catch and TJ can run, there's some things that would need to improve overall, like Laporta. I mean, he blows you up in the running game. His pass protection's terrific, and he's a wonderful catcher and runner and leaper and all that. Well, it's when they traded TJ Hawkinson, it was kind of like, well, yeah, we know he's good, but we also know you're going to have to pay him.
Right.
Which the Vikings did.
Yep.
So they got a division rival to put a fat deal on a player, which potentially could hamstring them via the salary cap. And we know they knew they were going to get Laporta.
Yeah.
They knew they were going to get exactly who they wanted, where they wanted. They just needed the currency.
Right.
I mean, I think Brad Holmes played really fast on that.
Yeah, they did a nice job. And I remember that draft too. They take Jahmyr Gibbs, and everybody's like, "Wow, that's a high value for a running back."
Traded up for him, I think.
Yeah, and he's been terrific. So a player the Vikings liked a lot in that draft. Gibbs is as well. So yeah, they found pieces that worked for what they need, and Goff becoming what he's become in that offense, in part because that offensive line does such a good job, and then Laporta kind of mixes into that. It all worked very well for where they are and kind of where they're trying to go.
Well, and trading TJ.
Good work by them.
Yeah,
allowed them to pay Penei Sewell.
Yep.
It allowed them to re-up Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yep.
You can kind of look at those dominoes falling.
And Goff.
And they get to bounce, and Goff, and they get to balance with these rookies in Laporta and Gibbs, some high leverage players that are on rookie deals. Now,
well, how about that draft quickly? I mean, Laporta, Gibbs, Brian Branch.
Oh.
Yeah.
Damn, man, that's a hell of a draft right there, boys.
Jack Campbell was in that too.
And
I
he
think
was bad for a minute, but then all of a sudden he got good second half of the season. Now he's a tackling machine.
Yeah, they got a lot from that haul. And I remember they had all those picks, and everybody initially was like, this is all. I mean, the immediate draft reaction was, this is all you got from all of these picks? But, well, now it's like, all of those players fit what they're doing pretty well.
I would never lecture fans on it, but we've received similar when you're talking about players that are out there. So it is Jeffrey Simmons, it is Dexter Lawrence, right? It is the big names. And J.C. Horn, not that he's he's kind of found himself quietly in Charlotte. Now, I actually love him because I think I saw a video over the weekend of him screaming at Sean Payton after a game. So that means he's already got a fan in Minnesota.
Wait, who did that? I'm buying a game game worn on Amazon right now.
J.C. Horn.
Love him.
Yeah, absolutely. But my perception, and you can tell me if this is fair or unfair, that I think Kwesi really wants to hold on to that first round pick.
Yeah.
And it also kind of flies in the face of what he's done and how he's talked about getting younger and getting more financially flexible to go out and then say we're going to, because that's an all-in move. And if you're taking on the contract of a Jeffrey Simmons, if you're taking on the contract, I think he's 28, 29, and I love the guy, but Dexter Lawrence.
Yep.
And so if you're trying to get more financially flexible, if you're trying to get younger, and this is the long game, then it kind of flies in the face. So I'm like most fans. I need to see more in the interior of that defense. I've spent more time down on Gilmore over the last couple of games than just about anybody. But in the same sense, like, it is that J.C. Horn. There's I've seen some Greg Newsome rumblings out of Cleveland now that they're kind of going belly up.
Yeah, I mentioned him in my story too.
Oh, you did? Okay, perfect. So names like that seem more realistic to me. It's not as sexy, but that plays in line more with Kwesi holding his first and still considering multi-years into the future.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider there, because I think you could make the argument that if you trade that pick for somebody that comes in and contributes and is here for several more years, that's actually a pretty good return on investment for a pick that you expect to be 28, 29, 30, whatever. Every time I say this, everybody says, just say 32, because 30 means another NFC Championship game loss. For the sake of the argument, late in the first round, whatever.
The depth of the dwelling.
Oh my gosh, the fatalism is it's remarkable. But you could make the argument that that's a good value for that spot, and I think there's also the case to be made that if they are going to have this cheap quarterback window, that typically is the time where you say, let's push all the chips in. But if you do that, you do see those bills come due fairly quickly in the next 3-4 years. So there's always this thing of they're going to have cap space, and I think they're going to have it for the next few years.
Oh, yeah.
But you do have to be mindful of the fact that it can turn pretty quickly into, you look at the last regime where it's let's sign all of these guys to long-term deals, 2018, sign all of these draft picks, and then by 2020 or so, and that's especially with an expensive quarterback, you are doing the, Rob Brzezinski go do backflips every year to get us cap compliant, and then we can go out and do a few things kind of on the margins. So it is always a dance. People talk about the cap isn't real. The cap is real. It's just you have to have owners that spend over the cap with the cash that they comply or that they deploy, I should say, to make these things happen, which the Wilfs do that. And then you have to have a cap guy that can make it all work. But it's not necessarily easy to go out and get in a good cap space all of the time. So you do have to think about that long term while saying there is going to be a window here where the quarterback is not expensive. And that is the time where you can start to push and say, let's spend some money to have a team that can go take advantage of that, like we've seen the Chiefs do with Mahomes when he was on a rookie deal. The 49ers have used this well, obviously, with Brock Purdy. There's kind of that two-track thing you have to play on if you're the general manager.
Lastly, what led you to Gophers and Terps this weekend?
Yeah, I had some friends in town, kind of our whole Minnesota Daily crew. David McCoy, who used to be at WCCO, he and I are still really close. Cool. Yeah, he's great. He and our families are still really close, and he has been one of my best friends for 15, 20 years, and a lot of this group, I'll shout them all out. Adam Summers, Matt Anderson, Chris Lempis couldn't make it, but that's kind of the whole group of guys I was at the Daily with that we've stayed really good friends for 20 years or so, and a lot of them came in town. It happened to be mini bye weekend. It happened to be homecoming.
Sweet.
So we're like, well, let's go do Gophers, and played way, way, way too much NCAA College Football 25 on the Xbox. That was kind of the primary reason to get together, but the fact that the Gopher game got in there and we got to see Max Brosmer cut up the Terps was fun too.
And the true freshman, Coy Parrish with an interception. Nice spin move and a 45-yard return on the fan.
Yeah, he's impressive. He's been impressive all year. It was fun to kind of see that happen in person. They had a lot of good things going. The number of the receivers that made some nice sideline catches. They looked awfully good on both sides of the ball, they're going to have tougher games coming. But yeah, it was a fun day at Huntington Bank Stadium.
You, my friend, are terrific. Thank you very much for the time. And best of luck with the newsletter this week on Friday, okay?
Thank you.
Ben Goessling at Ben Goessling via Twitter. And that's courtesy of Standard Heating and Air and standardheating.com. News due north around the corner. Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, joins us live from the TCO radio studio about 17 minutes from now.
Tune in to Wild Wednesday each week for your chance to win tickets to see your Minnesota Wild in an upcoming game. Wild Wednesdays are presented by Jim Beam, a crowd pleaser since 1795.
Welcome back, 9 to noon. It is News du Nord, brought to you by The Casino at Canterbury Park. CanterburyPark.com for all event details. Feeling the felt all year round. Poker, blackjack, and table games. You're having sips at chips, and you're tipping Derek Allen. You're having a blast at Canterbury, CanterburyPark.com. And as a reminder, all of you football fans with big opinions, they have the NFL Pick'em game on Thursdays. Opens up at 10 a.m. I think it goes 10 to 10 on Thursdays. And you just pick the weekend's NFL games. And if you have the best picks, you can win hundreds of dollars. So check that out as well. CanterburyPark.com. Local programming notes. Your Minnesota Wild are in Pittsburgh. They just took their first true L of the season in Philly over the weekend, but they're back at it tonight for a 6 p.m. puck drop in Pittsburgh against Crosby and the Penguins. And you can hear that right here on your home for Wild Hockey, the Fan. The reason I'm letting you know specifically where to find this stuff is because Wolves are hosting the Mavs tonight at 6:30. It's another sports buffet. You got Wild in Pittsburgh at 6 on the Fan. You have Alan Horton on the call. Mavericks at Target Center tonight at 6:30. And you're going to get to hear that on the exclusive Timberwolves channel on the free iHeartRadio app. You'll also, if you want to, if you're like me, you got YouTube TV, what you do is you turn down the TV volume and you can match up the TNT broadcast on television with the Alan Horton call, and you can be partying on a Tuesday night. Specifically to the Minnesota Timberwolves, 5-point favorites tonight. Something to watch for those of you out there, whether it's for fantasy reasons or you just want to see your favorite team get a W at home tonight. The Dallas Mavericks did play a front end of a back-to-back last night. They beat Utah, and they flew here overnight. And so what does that mean in terms of Luka, who had an awful shooting night last night? What does it mean for Kyrie, who played nearly 40 minutes? Are we getting the full lineup? They got Klay Thompson now, so threes are coming from everywhere. PJ from the corner, Klay Thompson, oh my. So watching out for that in terms of, is anybody sitting on back-to-backs at this stage of the season? But PA, from the home opener to the Mavs tonight, you lose to them in the conference title game.
Yep.
And then I believe it's on Friday, you get the Nugs. You beat them in 7 last year. This is a really cool stretch to start the season at Target Center.
No doubt. And interesting with the Kyrie Irving situation you brought up, because that is a lot of minutes with travel. And he is one of the players, Luka kind of too, where they will skip games on back-to-backs. Philadelphia's doing it eventually when they get to Joel Embiid and Paul George back. They're not going to play back-to-backs or one of the two of back-to-backs. So yeah, that's en vogue around the league. I'd be curious to see if Kyrie plays tonight. Would like him to play. Just a little early season class check when it comes to, say, Dante DiVincenzo and Anthony Edwards, checking Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, and funneling them to Stifle Tower and or Julius Randle with all those rebounds. But that one's tonight. That's sweet. We have Kevin O'Connell related news to share. Today is a day that we have Kevin O'Connell on the radio show at 11 o'clock every Tuesday. We are going to have Kevin O'Connell on the radio 6 minutes from now, but he's going to do it via Zoom from his office.
Okay.
Because he's not feeling well, and the servitude of the head coach is second to none. He doesn't potentially want to get others sick. So therefore, full interview with KO coming up about 6-7 minutes from now. but it'll be Zoom related in his office.
Yeah, we have everybody from the VEN. I saw one of the Wilfs walking through the hallway. They're trying to get the technology end of this thing set up, and it looks like, as usual, VEN on top of it, taking care of business.
Yeah.
Pumped to have the head coach on. I'm curious what you think about this, PA, because, talking about the back-to-back bids, and it's so, load management and the conversations that pop up every single year in the NBA, it's kind of frustrating at times, and it's a TNT game, so from a national perspective, you'd like to see the biggest players on the biggest stage in prime time this evening. But I'm curious, moving forward, it's always been the bit where you see other teams do those things with the back-to-backs and load management, et cetera. The Wolves don't do that. And if Anthony Edwards has been healthy enough to play, he's going to play. He's going to play 80, 81 games if he can. But now we got Julius Randle in the mix. Does that change part of the philosophy? And I know there've been some injured seasons in recent years, but Karl Anthony Towns, if he's healthy enough to play, he's going to play. That's kind of been, something that philosophically that our squad, Finchie's group, has always kind of stiff-armed. Like, if we're going to play our best guys if they're able to play.
Yep.
But now you got Randle in the mix with an injury history. Rudy's not getting any younger, and you definitely want to continue to build up Naz Reid and those sorts of things. You think that's something that Finch ever talks about? I know we're probably going to have him on later this week.
Always talked about it on our show.
But how to deal with that? I'm glad, and I've heard him say that, and I love that. I'm just curious how that changes, maybe with Julius in the mix and stuff.
Conley would be the A topic.
Conley as well. That's a great one. Yes,
he hates it, and he hates any form of load. He hates the term load management, and then jipping or ripping off fans, specifically at home, of their opportunity to see some of the better players when he knows they can play and they know they can play. So that's negative with Finch, and indeed we will chat with him during the course of the week at some point. When we return, Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, joins 9 to noon into the final hour at FM 100.3 KFAN.